Welcome to another episode of Mystery Bible. My name is Ken Primus. I am your host. What I wanted to do in this episode is to focus a little on Nimrod. We want to go back and see who he is and give you an introduction to this gentleman because he's pivotal in society and the history of human development as well. He plays a tremendous role in the birth of a new religion, in the sense where men all over the world began to talk about this one singular person, and that one singular person was Nimrod. And as when what happened in the Tower of Babel, that when the language came in and they separated, they still talked about this particular one person. So the Bible mentions little about him, and the book of Jasher goes in and mentions a little more. And so what I'll do is just basically read we see him first in Genesis chapter 10:8. It says, "And Cush begot Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth." First Chronicles 1:10, "And Cush begot Nimrod, and he began to be mighty upon the earth." So what I'm going to do now is take us to the book of Jasher, because it gives us a little more detail as to who he is, and we will take a look at that. And that's found in Jasher chapter 7 and verse 23 is where I want to take the verse from. "And Cush, the son of Ham, the son of Noah, took a wife in those days in his old age, and she bare a son again, and they call his name Nimrod, saying, At that time the sons of men again began to rebel and transgress against God. And the child grew up, and his father loved him exceedingly, for he was the son of his old age." And so we are going to leave it at that, and then we're going to come back after this message, and we're going to go into a little more about Enoch, study some things about him, and there are things that the Bible does not mention that the book of Jasher mentioned, and so we're going to take a look at those things in conjunction of who this guy was, and what he had accomplished. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Mystery Bible. As we continue our study on Nimrod, we, as much as we know about him, there's still a lot we don't know about him. I'll put it that way. And scholars over the years have came up with names. They believe that Gilgamesh is another name for him. They believe out of many different cultures. Out of the Babylonian deity Marduk, they believe he's another incarnation of Nimrod, and so there's a lot of speculation as to who he is through the different cultures. But we're going to take a look later when we get into Nimrod and the building of the Tower of Babel. But this guy is very fascinating, and it is believed that he is, from some of the teachings of today, that he may be the Antichrist that they will bring back due to the fact of that they had located his remains in Iraq. And so they believe that through DNA manipulation that they will be able to bring him back and that he would be the Antichrist. So, but this guy is very fascinating in the history of mankind as a whole. So, what we're going to do is go back. I want to take a look at the book of Jasher. The book of Jasher covers a lot about him and some of the things that took place about him. So, I'm going to read a part of the book of Jasher, chapter 7, and I'm going to pick up on 23, and then we're going to go through and pick up some information out of there that is vital to getting a chance to understand who this guy is. And he, as I mentioned, is the beginning of the Nephilims, the resurgence of the Nephilims through the seed of Ham. Many of the Nephilims came through, and we are going to go and take a look at them. I know from his sons, Canaan, his grandson Canaan, a lot of them came through that lineage. But okay, let's go and take a look and see some of the things that took place with Nimrod, and then we'll go from there. So I'll pick up on 23. It says, "And Cush, the son of Ham, the son of Noah, took a wife in those days in his old age, and he bare a son, and they called his name Nimrod, saying, At that time the sons of men again began to rebel and transgress against God. And the child grew up, and his father loved him exceedingly, for he was the son of his old age. And the garment of skin which God made for Adam and his wife when they went out of the garden were given to Cush. For after the death of Adam and his wife, the garment was given to Enoch, the son of Jared. And when Enoch was taken up to God, he gave unto them Methuselah his son. And at the death of Methuselah, Noah took them and brought them to the ark, and they were with him until he went out of the ark. And when Ham begot, and in their going out, verse 27, and in their going out, Ham stole those garments from Noah his father, and he took them and hid them from his brothers. And when Ham begat his firstborn Cush, he gave him the garment in secret. And they were with Cush many days. And Cush also concealed them from his sons and brothers. And when Cush had begotten Nimrod, he gave him those garments, through his love for him. And Nimrod grew up, and when he was 20 years old, he put on those garments. And so there's a scripture in the Bible that says that he became a mighty man. When you read the book of Genesis, you'll see that it says that he became a mighty man. And from what this is saying, it was that when he put on this garment, he became a mighty man. So what we're going to do is continue reading this, because again, it's giving us some insight as to who this guy was. And we'll go from there. So, and when he was 20 years old, he put on those garments. And Nimrod became strong when he put on the garments. And God gave him might and strength, and he was a mighty hunter in the earth. Yea, he was a mighty hunter in the field, and he hunted the animals. He built altars, and he offered upon them the animals before the Lord. And Nimrod strengthened himself, and he rose up from amongst his brethren, and he fought the battles of his brethren against all their enemies round about. And the Lord delivered all the enemies of his brethren in his hand, and God prospered him from time to time in his battles, and he reigned upon the earth. Therefore it became current in those days when a man ushered forth those that he had trained up for battle. He would say to them, like God did to Nimrod, who was a mighty hunter in the earth, and who succeeded in the battles that prevailed against him, his brethren, that he delivered them from the hands of their enemies. So may God strengthen us and deliver us this day. And so we are getting some insight as to this guy, and it was saying that he had a relationship with God Almighty, and God was prospering him, and he grew in stature. And so we're going to continue reading and see what this particular book has to say about him. And again, we're taking this information, we're looking at it through the eyes of several other documents, but right now we're looking at the book of Jasher, and this is a historical book that many early fathers in the church used and talked about. Jude, we know that several other men in the Bible used this particular book, and so I would venture to say that the book of Jasher is something that is of canon that we can gather information from. And I know the argument is that it was not inspired by God, but yet in the culture that this is a part of, they utilize this particular book as that. And so we're trying to gather information about this young man, Nimrod, so that we can get a chance to understand who he is. And when Nimrod was 40 years old, at the time there was a war between his brothers and the children of Japheth, so that they were in the powers of their enemies. And Nimrod ran forth at that time, and he assembled all the sons of Cush and their families, about 460 men, and he hired also some of his friends and acquaintances, about 80 men, and he hired them, and they went with him to battle. And when he was on the road, Nimrod strengthened the hearts of the people that went with him, and he said to them, "Do not fear, neither be alarmed, for all our enemies will be delivered unto our hands, and you may do with them as you please." And all the men that went were about 500, and they fought against their enemies, and they destroyed them, subdued them, and Nimrod placed standing officers over them in the respective places. And he took some of their children as security, and they were all servants to Nimrod and to his brethren. And Nimrod and all the people that were with him turned homeward. And when Nimrod had joyfully returned from the battle after conquering his enemies, all his brethren, together with those who knew him before, assembled to make him king over them, and they placed the regal crown upon his head. And so, according to this book, is saying that the people after this particular battle, they decided that they want him to be their king, and so they set him over as ruler of them at the time. And so he then now begins to, he said, it goes on, it says, and he set over his subject and people princes, judges, rulers, as it was the custom amongst kings. And he placed Terah, the son of Nehor, the prince of his hosts, and dignified him and elevated him above all of his princes. Now, this is Abraham's father. And so Terah is Abraham's father, and Abraham's father was a part, as we see, was a part of the leadership in the kingdom of Nimrod. And there was a prophecy that you will, as we read, you'll see there's a prophecy that was told about one of Abraham, and that Abraham would be something to be concerned about. And Nimrod actually tried to kill him. And in another study, we'll probably get a chance to see it, that he tried to kill Abraham, but a miracle took place and Abraham was saved. Again, this was with lions, just as they do with Daniel. I guess that scripture where it says there's nothing new under the sun kind of comes to mind with that particular incident. So we see that these princes were elected. Abraham's dad he's the chief above all the princes, and as we go on to the story, there's some in there, and I wanted to gather all of it because this thing with Nimrod. We see that he had, as I mentioned, a relationship with God, and he eventually turns his back on God, and he began to form and get these men and women, his subjects. He gathered them from all around the world to come and work on this particular project that he had decided to put together. And that project was the Tower of Babel. There's some really fascinating stuff as to the people that were working on there. Some of them were doing specific things that they wanted to get as a result of working on this project. And when God came down and spoke to them, when God came down and confused their languages, there are certain things that took place as a result of that we're going to go in depth when we get to that particular podcast. But this particular book has quite a few information about this young man, Nimrod, and I want to get at all of it so that we can see, get a glimpse into his kingship, how he was ruling at the time, and we will get to see that with his relationship with Abraham's father, Tara, and we will get a chance to really look into him. But we're going to continue reading. Verse 42 says, "And whilst he was reigning according to his heart's desire, after having conquered all his enemy around, he advised with his councils to build a city for his palace. And they did so. And they found a large valley opposite to the east, and they built him a large and extensive city. And Nimrod called the name of the city that he built Shinar, for the Lord had vehemently shaken his enemies and destroyed them. And Nimrod dwelt in Shinar, and he reigned securely, and he fought with his enemies and subdued them, and he prospered in all his battles, and his kingdom became very great." And verse 45, I'll stop after that. I'll pick up here. It says, "And all nations and tongue heard of his fame, and they gathered themselves to him, and they bowed down to the earth, and they brought him offering, and he became their Lord and King, and they all dwelt with him in the city of Shinar. And Nimrod reigned in the earth over all the sons of Noah, and they were all under his power and counsel." Now, see where it says the sons of Noah. So that include Japheth and Shem. And so his reign was over the entire earth at the time. And when you study the history of the other brothers, the descendants of Noah, you'll see that Nimrod actually, the guy that started Armenia. We'll go back into him. I actually talked to him about him earlier, that he had Nimrod's son. He had left, actually, Nimrod, because he didn't believe in all the things that was going on with Nimrod. He left, and when he left, a small army of Nimrod's son, 60 of them, I believe, went to say, actually it was Hayek, and they went to go to Armenia to get him and bring him back. But what happened was, when Hayek's son told him that Nimrod's son was coming for him, they came, and actually he shot him with an arrow that killed Nimrod's son. So what we're going to do is take a break, and we're going to come back after this break. Welcome back to Mystery Bible. As we continue looking at Nimrod, we left off in chapter 7 of verses 45 in the book of Jasher. And we're looking at this man's life. We're trying to gather some information as to who he is. And then what we'll do is go to other pieces of study. But I wanted to gather our information from this particular book because it does give us a lot of detail about who he is. And I left off on verse 45, and it says, "And all nations and tongue heard of his fame, and they gathered themselves to him, and they bowed down to the earth, and they bowed down, and they brought him offerings, and he became their Lord and King, and they all dwelt with him in the city of Shinar, and Nimrod reigned in the earth over all the sons of Noah, and they were all under his power and counsel." So it tells us that Noah's sons, all of them, were under his power. That means Japheth, that means Shem, all of them were under his power at that time. This was also around the time that Abraham was going to be born, and we're going to go into some of that and give you a little background as to Nimrod's relationship with Abram and his father. So let's continue as we read, and we see that first verse 46, "And all the earth was of one tongue and words of union. But Nimrod did not go in the ways of the Lord, and he became more wicked than all men that were before him from the days of the flood until those days." And so we see something happen between Nimrod and God. We see earlier that God had blessed him. We saw that God had given him victory, but something happened between him and his relationship with God, because we see in verse 46 that relationship was severed, it was changed, and we see that he began to set up gods of woods and stone and so forth. So let me go back into a little back story about this gentleman. We know that his father, Cush, had concealed a couple of things, and he had concealed the fact that he stole the garment from his father had stole it from Noah. Ham had stole it from Noah, and he gave it to Cush, and then Cush gave it to Nimrod. But also Ham had collected a couple of other things as well, and we get that from other studies that are out there, that he had walked into a cave that had the inscription from the angels about casting of spell and counter curses and all of these different things that he had put together, and he hid that as well. That's the other information that he hid. and he passed that down to his sons, and he gave that to Cush, and Cush gave it to Nimrod. And Nimrod, I believe, it could have been that at this point in time, maybe conjecturally, I'm talking, that he began to look at this information, and as a result, he severed his relationship with God, and he began to set up gods other than God, and he made gods of wood and stones, and he bowed down to them, and he rebelled against the Lord and taught all his subjects and all the people of the earth his wicked ways. And Mardon, his son, was more wicked than his father. And everyone that heard of the act of Mardon, the son of Nimrod, would say concerning him, from the wicked goeth forth wickedness. Therefore it became a proverb in the whole earth, saying, from the wicked goeth forth wickedness. And it was current in the words of men from that time to this. And Terah, the son of Nahor, prince of Namor's host, was in those days very great in the sight of the king and in his subject. And the king and princes loved him, and they elevated him very high. So this was the introduction of Abraham's father. He is a part of Nimrod's prince and leadership. And so he takes a wife and he gets married, and Amathello is his wife and the daughter of Carnival, and they give him a son, and in those days, and he was 70 years old when he begot him, and Terah called the name of his son that he had born was Abram, and he raised this child up. So now what happens is this. They had a party at Terah's house. They came to celebrate, and all of Nimrod's wise men and his conjurers, they all came to eat and drink in the house of Terah one night when Abram was born. And then what they did after they were celebrating, they saw in the sky that one star, a big star, ran through the skies and ate up four other stars. And they believed that this was the child, a sign of this child. And so what they had thought that this child would be is this. And they said to each other, the only betoken the child that has been born to Terah this night will grow up and be fruitful and multiply and possess all the earth, he and his children forever, and he and his seed will slay great kings and inherit their land. And so they saw this in the sky, and they made this conjecture, and now they run and they tell Nimrod, hey guys, we were hanging out at Terah's house, we had some drinks, we saw this, and we just want to let you know about it. And they said, what they basically said is, let's bring his father up, let's grab this kid, and let's kill him. And Nimrod agrees. And so Nimrod calls Terah before him and begins to tell him, says, hey, let me bring your child, to me. And he knew that he would kill this child. So what he did was he began to bargain for his kid, as any father would do or any parent. And so, but anyway, Nimrod told him to bring the kid. And he said to him, look, I know I have to do this. Give me 3 days and I'll bring my son to you. And so he left, and he got away from the presence of Nimrod. And so what he came up with was a scheme, and he gave the king someone else's child, and Nimrod smashes this child's head and kills the kid. But what he did was he took his mother, Nimrod's mom, and a nurse, and he hid them in a cave. And they stayed there. He actually brought provisions to them every month. It says that he brought provisions to them. And when Nimrod killed this kid, he thought everything was fine. And so Abram is in this cave, and he was there for 10 years. It tells us that Nimrod and his boys forgot about him. And so this was around about the time that Sarai was born to Hiram. And also, he Hiram was 30 years old. He got a wife and conceived and gave him a son. And they called his name Lot. And she conceived again and bare a daughter, and they called her name Malak. And she again conceived and bare a daughter, and she was named Sarai. And Haran was 42 years old when he begot Sarai, which was in the 10th year of Abraham's life. So here he is. He's 10 years older than her, and he is now being escorted out of the cave. He goes and lives with Noah, and he grows up with Noah and Shem until it was time that he grew up as a man. And so we see that Abraham's family had interaction with Nimrod because of his father's position. And when Nimrod finds out that he didn't kill Abram, then another issue came about. And it tells us that Nimrod lost his mind and began to do different things. And as a result, Terah's brother got killed. And that's why Lot, the next time we see Lot in the Bible tells us that he was without his father. And when Abram was called out, he took Lot with him, who again died. His father died as a result of Nimrod. And we will see that the lineage that and Abraham, it was correct that Abraham's family did kill the kid and became a giant slayer, which Nimrod was one of those giants. And he was actually killed by Esau. As you read also these books, they tell us that it was Esau that killed him. And the story about Jacob and Esau we know about, when Esau told them that Jacob said he wants some food and so forth, and we know what happened. And there was a delay. We read in the Bible there's a delay, and that's why he missed his blessing. And Jacob got the blessing over him, Israel, the father, because of some food. And we all used to get upset because everyone would wonder, why did he sell his birthright over some food? You know what I mean? And but now we get to know, reading the backstory in the book of Jasher, was that he had killed Nimrod and he was in hiding. He was running, trying to hide from Nimrod's men. And he had decapitated Nimrod, and so he was hiding out. And as a result of running and hiding, he was late for the appointed time that was supposed to be making this stew for his father. And we know what happened with that story. And so he lost his birthright as a result of all of that. And it wasn't just he had sold it for food. He was hiding from a giant from his giant's men that was hunting him. And so that is some backstory as to this gentleman, Nimrod. And we'll go and look at him even further because in history, we know that he was the person that had set up the Tower of Babel, and that judgment came upon the people at that place because he had set up their own religion. As we read, he had turned all of mankind away from God and had them begin to worship idols and wood and all of these things, including Abraham's family. Abraham's father was one of those that worship these idols as well. And we will study in our next episode. We're going to look at the Tower of Babel itself and see what happened there. And some really fascinating stuff took place. We know that this gentleman Nimrod, his name spread all over the world because when they scattered, they carried the story of what happened with this leader, and that everyone was expecting that this leader would come back. But the Bible was very specific about how he died and so forth. The book of Jasher, so we know how he died. But one of the stories that they tell us that when our army went to Iraq, they went to retrieve his body because they want to bring him back. So that's a really interesting tidbit there. But that was one of the things that they found out and that took place. But I want to thank you guys for coming to our show here at Mystery Bible. I ask that you support us, that you become a subscriber, that you tell people about us as we begin to walk. We're walking through the Bible, and what I'm doing is just picking major themes that took place in the Bible as we begin to walk all the way through. And so I want to thank you, and it is my hope that you and I will study the Word of God so that we can become effective for His kingdom. Thank you for listening to Mystery Bible. Let's walk through the Bible and learn of God and His beautiful mercies and all that He has provided for us, that we may become effective for His kingdom and change this world. Check in every week for a new episode. Search for Mystery Bible on Anchor FM, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Castbox, Breaker, Outcasts, Radio Public, and many more.